The rain outside was the kind that didn't just fall. It pressed against the windows in heavy sheets, blurring the streetlights into smeared halos of orange. Inside O'Malley's tavern, the air was thick with the smell of wet coats, spilled beer, and the faint tang of bleach from the hurried cleanup of some earlier mess. The place had always been a little rough, a hole-in-the-wall joint wedged between a pawn shop and an all-night laundromat, but the locals swore it had its charm. The regulars claimed it was the kind of bar where everyone knew your name, though that wasn't always a good thing. On the far end of the counter, a man in a dark peacoat sat hunched over a half-empty pint. He wasn't a regular. The bartender, a wiry guy named Vince with tired eyes, noticed right away. He had that instinct bartenders develop, an uncanny radar for trouble. The stranger's face was too still, his gaze fixed not on the TV above the bar, but on the warped wooden door, as if waiting for someone or something. I was there that night, though I'd never intended to be. My friends had bailed on me after a concert, and with the rain making the streets a black, slick mess, I ducked into the first place I saw. O'Malley's wasn't welcoming in the conventional sense. Dim lighting, shadows pooling in the corners, a jukebox that only worked when it wanted to, but it was dry, and the neon sign promised whiskey, which was good enough. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Not the casual hum of a bar winding down near closing, but a heavier, stranger atmosphere. Conversations at the tables weren't the loose, drunken kind. They were quiet, clipped, and every so often, I'd see someone glance toward the stranger in the peacoat. When I took a stool, Vince shuffled over and poured me a drink without asking. Maybe he could tell I didn't want to talk either. The clock above the shelves of liquor clicked over to 11:17 p.m. That was when the door opened. It wasn't a slam or a hurried push, just a slow, deliberate creak as the warped frame let in a gust of cold, wet air. A woman stepped inside, soaked to the bone. Her hair was plastered to her face, her coat dripping onto the floor. She scanned the room, eyes darting like she expected someone to leap at her. When they landed on the man in the peacoat, she froze. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Vince muttered something under his breath and looked away, busying himself with glasses that didn't need cleaning. The other patrons pretended to mind their own business, but I could feel the room tightening, like a held breath. Then the woman walked toward him, each step squelching softly on the warped floorboards. She didn't sit, just stood at his shoulder and said in a low, shaking voice, "You shouldn't be here." The man didn't look at her. "Neither should you," he said. Something passed between them then, something cold and heavy, though I couldn't put my finger on what. My drink was half raised to my lips when I noticed something else. The door behind them had swung shut on its own. No one had touched it, and yet the old latch clicked into place with a sound that was far too loud for the small bar. The latch clicked, and every head turned as if the sound had a hand attached to it, gripping the base of each person's skull. Even the TV above the bar seemed to notice. The sports anchor's mouth opened in a silent O, the picture freezing for a half-second before stuttering back to life. The woman's coat dripped a small dark pool at her feet. The man in the peacoat didn't blink. I watched his knuckles tighten around the glass with the deliberate care of someone handling a grenade. Vince dried a glass that was already dry and put it down with too much force. "You two need a table?" he asked, and his voice came out rough, like it had been stored in a dusty box. The woman finally sat, but not with the man. She took the stool one down from him like there had to be space for the thing sitting between them. She angled herself slightly toward him, head cocked, as if listening for a sound buried under the clatter and hum. "Been a while," she said. The man nodded once. "Weather," he said. "Weather," she agreed, quietly mocking the non-answer. She lifted a hand for a drink. Vince poured without asking. He set down a whiskey neat, then left the bottle, which he didn't usually do for strangers. He didn't look either of them in the face. "Last call's early tonight," he added, like a threat offered for free. A couple in a booth near the window were arguing in the low, grinding way that meant the fight had been going on all week. Their voices faltered, drifted, then stopped altogether as the door breathed again. Just a small inhale, a sigh taken by Wood. The neon beer sign above the jukebox buzzed, then brightened, washing the bar in tired pink. A song selected itself. The first chord was out of tune, as if plucked by arthritic fingers. Elvis, but slower, bluish and bent out of shape. I put a 20 on the counter to make myself look like someone who belonged there and took a small sip of whiskey, which landed hot in my stomach. My instinct was to leave, but the rain outside had thickened to a wet curtain, and the hold of the room was a physical thing, like a barstool bolted to the floor. The stranger in the pea coat finally broke the stalemate. He turned to the woman the way a door swings toward a draft. "Did you bring it?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to me. Not a long look, just enough to mark me. And then down to her bag, a beat-up satchel that would have looked at home in the trunk of a taxi. She unbuckled it under the bar lip like she didn't trust the air above to keep a secret. "I brought what's left," she said. "Which is the part nobody wants." "We don't want any part of it," Vince said, from way too close. He'd materialized with the quiet of a cat. He set down a plastic ramekin full of bar nuts that had the density of gravel. "Drink, talk, then out. Last call in 40. The clock said 11:17 p.m. I waited for it to tick, to whisper to the next minute. Didn't. It was the kind of thing you only notice if you're trying not to notice anything. I checked my phone. 11:19 p.m. The bar clock didn't care. The baseball game on TV hiccuped. The pitcher lifted his leg, froze mid-kick, then resumed, like someone had a hand on the feed. The peanut gallery ignored it all with the stubbornness of people who had practiced ignoring for years. A regular with a cap that read coach had begun telling the guy beside him a story I'd already half heard when I sat down. Something about a break-in 2 blocks over, about the robber who didn't take anything but left a glass of water in every room. He talked like he wanted the story to be true because that would mean his life had edges. "You gonna tell him?" the woman said to the man. "Or am I?" He brought the glass to his mouth, paused, set it down. "No stories," he said. "Not tonight. Tonight's exactly stories," she said, soft. "It always is here." She turned slightly, and I saw the raw edge of a scar that began at her temple and disappeared into her hairline. A pale, tight line thick as a shoelace. She caught me looking and didn't seem to mind. She was used to being seen, or she didn't think seeing changed anything. She reached into the satchel and set something on the bar. It was a little metal triangle about the size of a matchbook, dented, blackened on one side like it had been held in a flame. It made a noise when she put it down. A faint hiss, like the last breath of a match going out. "No," Vince said. His hand came down near it, not touching, fingers spread as if to stop a spill without getting wet. "We don't put that here. It belongs here," she said, not arguing, just stating the exact shape of a fact. "It's where we took it from. Remember?" A tall guy at the dartboard turned, 2 darts between his knuckles like teeth. "Hey," he said, "you're not gonna start that again, are you?" He had the kind of face that gets you out of speeding tickets and into trouble. "Because last time—" "Throw your darts, Ryan," Vince said without looking. Ryan clicked his mouth shut and turned back to the board, but he missed the next throw so wide it thudded into the wall. The woman nudged the triangle with her nail. It rotated on an unseen center, tilted, resettled, like it had weight in the wrong directions. "Piece of the Halon plate," she said to me as if I'd asked. "From the cellar. When the system went off." I let it land and looked at the shelves. There was a gap where a gallon jug of well vodka should have been, and in that negative space I saw an old laminated sign pinned crooked to the mirror. An O-tab without card. No exceptions. Under that, in a permanent marker, a different hand had added. "NO basement after 11. I hadn't noticed that before. Maybe because 11 had arrived and hunkered down like a stubborn tenant. "Cellar's off limits," Vince said, as if I'd asked for a tour. "You're not missing anything. Keg lines and regrets." "There was a fire," the woman said softly. Was, Vince agreed. Past tense. She looked at him like she could see the singe marks around his denial. We should do this, she said to the stranger. He nodded without nodding and took the triangle, palming it the way you do with something that won't behave if you give it its own space. The jukebox creaked into a new track on its own. There was no touchscreen. Larry, a regular with a voice like a broken zipper, had fed it a 10 earlier and punched a 17. Then at 18, songs he knew by muscle memory. But this wasn't on the list. The chorus landed, unfamiliar and too familiar all at once, like a tune you hum without knowing the words. The door took another small breath. The couple in the booth stopped fighting entirely and stared at the condensation on their glass like it was mapping something under the table. The man in the pea coat spoke without looking at me. You'll want to finish your drink, he said, which is not a sentence you ignore in a place like this. If you leave any, it won't be yours. Sorry, I said. He angled the glass, letting the thin beer slide against the side. We keep finding people's drinks on the table downstairs. No lipstick, no fingerprints, just full. Like they got set out and never touched. Or like somebody poured seconds for folks who weren't invited. He blinked slowly. You sleep bad if you leave a drink unfinished down there. Down where you can't go after 11, I said. Rules keep honest people honest, Vince muttered, and the way he said people made a space for other kinds of customers. Tell it, the woman said again. He didn't, not yet. He slid off his stool with the weariness of a man who's memorized all the floors in a building. As he did, a quarter fell from his coat pocket and rolled in a soft silver curve along the bar top. It hit the triangular piece and stopped dead. The sound it made was wrong. A choked little clang that registered more in my teeth than my ears. Pick it up, the woman told me. I did. The coin was warm. Heads or tails? She asked. Heads, I said, because people always say heads. She turned it over in my palm. Both sides were tails. We tried to leave them upstairs, she said. Little things from down there. We thought light and laughter would clean them. But they don't like being out. They? I asked because I was still pretending there were nouns you could use in this conversation that meant the same thing to everyone. The man in the pea coat rubbed his jaw. Stories, he said. That's what sticks. He looked at my unfinished whiskey like he was checking the gauge on a tank. You knew here. Here's the problem. Everyone who drinks long enough at O'Malley's knows somebody who left and didn't make it home. Car, fight, heart, the street. Doesn't matter. What matters is that some of them keep stopping by. Not ghosts, not like that. They come back as moments. This place holds on to the last 10 minutes of a lot of people. I didn't laugh, but I let my face do the thing that tells the room you've filed the claim under folklore. The woman's mouth twitched. Sit with it a while, she said. See if your phone keeps up. My phone said 11:23. The bar clock said 11:17. The rain pressed its face to the window. Ryan missed another dart and swore that someone had brushed his elbow. But he was alone to his right. Vince coughed, an old sound, and reached below the bar. When his hand came back up, he was holding a metal keyring with 2 keys and a flat brass tab stamped 2. He set it down as if it weighed 10 pounds. The man in the pea coat stared at it. You serious? I'm tired, Vince said. And it's raining. None of that was an explanation. It was an admission of defeat. The woman took the keys. She slipped the triangular plate into her satchel, then patted the bag once like you might to soothe a pet. You coming? She asked me. I don't work here, I said. That's exactly who should come, she said. No stories crossed with your face yet. You're clean. The couple in the booth said in unison, without meaning to, don't, and then looked at each other, startled, like they'd brushed the same live wire. The man in the pea coat watched me choose. He didn't push. He didn't need to. The bar wanted me downstairs the way the ocean wants you when you get beyond the breakers. People always think a place wants to keep you safe. Places want to be full. I'll just look, I said, lying to both of us. The woman slid off her stool, water flicking from the hem of her coat. The man nodded at Vince, who had already decided to not see any of this. We walked past the jukebox, which clicked forward a song without finishing the one it was on, past the bathrooms with the cracked tile, to the short hallway with the exit sign that had been unplugged so long the cord had a dust tail. The cellar door was at the end, painted the same dead white as the wall so you could pretend you hadn't noticed it. Someone had scrawled "NO staff" only across it in black marker and then half-heartedly crossed it out. The key slid in with the finality of something undisturbed. The woman held the handle and waited. "When we go down," she said, "don't touch the rails. If you need to hold something, hold the person ahead of you. And if you hear your name behind you, don't turn around." "Okay," I said, as if you can ever prepare for an instruction like that. She opened the door. Cool air flowed up, clean in that hollow way that isn't really clean. The stairs were narrow and concrete, the kind that were poured by a landlord to meet a code and nothing else. The man in the pea coat clicked on a flashlight that had a nervous beam. It jittered along the wall, showing old posters stuck there by beer glue and time. Fights on pay-per-view St. Patty's parties from a decade ago. A flyer for a missing dog with the word "found" added in ballpoint and then scratched out. The steps counted themselves under our feet. 7, 8, 9, 12. The bar above shrank to a noise like a refrigerator cycling on and off. The last step wasn't a step. It was a lip into a concrete room that had been 2 rooms once and then got tired of arguing with itself. Kegs leaned in rows like chrome tombstones. The lines ran up to the ceiling, disappearing into black, hissing occasionally the way a sleeping thing clears its throat. On the far wall was a square metal box with Halon stamped on it. Its faceplate had a triangular bite missing. The woman's flashlight found a necklace of dust along the baseboards, interrupted in places by finger drawings, initials, dates carved with a key. I felt the weight of the upstairs pressing down through the ceiling. It was measurable, like the number of people and glasses and lies above had a mass that could bend the floor. The clock here, mounted above the breaker panel, also said 11:17. "Don't worry about the time," the man said, catching me looking. "Worry about whether it stops. That's what time is," I said, trying on bravado. "Stopping. Not here," he said gently. He cut the flashlight toward the far corner. There was a table there, low, the kind you put a radio on while you move boxes. On it were 3 glasses, clean, a thin skin of dust on 2, the middle one glistening with condensation as if someone had just set it down. No lipstick, no fingerprints, just full. The man exhaled, a rattle. "Whose is that?" I asked. The woman didn't answer. She set her hand on my shoulder and steered me so I was facing the table but could still see the stairs in the side of my vision. "We don't say names out loud if we don't want them called," she said. "That's not superstition. It's courtesy." The man took the triangle from her bag. He fitted it toward the missing piece on the Halon plate. It didn't fit, not exactly. It should have, but it refused the reunion like a dog refusing a bath. He held it there anyway. The air got colder at the edges, warmer at the center, the way a room feels before a thunderstorm. The jukebox upstairs quit pretending to be random and began to play a song from the bar's first night open. A fact I didn't know and knew anyway. The man spoke, finally telling the story she'd asked him to tell. "They said it wasn't a fire," he said. "That's the line on the paperwork. They said the system didn't work right and choked the room, ate all the air. They said a candle fell or a line sparked, and the Halon kicked, and no one should have been down here anyway. But the thing is, there were 3 of them and we only ever found 2. The woman stilled beside me. "We didn't find her because she kept leaving before we got there," she said. "Leaving?" I asked because my brain needed the sentence to be less impossible. "Leaving the part where she was missing," the woman said, as if it were that simple. "We'd come down and there'd be 3 glasses and 2 people and the third would be almost a person's shape in the condensation. And then the shape would be less and less. Every time we looked away, she took a step toward upstairs without moving." "You're saying she's still here?" I'm saying she has a tab, the man said. And no card. We stood with that for a while. The keg lines hummed. Somewhere above, a chair dragged. A bark of laughter died immediately. The air held the damp memory of bleach and beer. My phone vibrated, and I nearly threw it. Unknown number, no caller ID, the kind of call that looks like the phone itself wants your attention. I didn't answer. The man set the triangle on the table next to the full glass, and it made that bitten sound again, and the condensation on the glass sketched a little tremor, like breath on a mirror. If you're trying to make me believe, I said, you're overshooting. I meant it as humor to put a wedge in the door opening in my head. We don't care what you believe, the woman said. We care what you see. The beam of the flashlight passed over the far wall, and for a heartbeat there were shadows on it that didn't match us. You know how your head makes the shapes of people out of coats and mops? This wasn't that. These had knees where knees go. They had the quiet certainty of things that existed when no one looked. And then they were gone. How long you been doing this? I asked the woman, keeping my voice steady so my feet would stay. Too long, she said. Not long enough, the man added. The lights upstairs dimmed, brightened, dimmed, like the bar was breathing with us. The basement clock remembered itself and clicked to 11:18, then thought better of it and twitched back. Something moved on the stairs. A weight settled on the third step, the one with the hairline crack. It made the sound stairs make for bodies. The woman didn't look. She took my hand with the economy of a surgeon and pressed it. Once. Remember what I said? She whispered. Something breathed my name behind us. It said it exactly right, with the little upward lilt my mother used when she wanted me to help carry groceries. My spine tried to turn my head by itself. The woman's fingers tightened. The man said, very gently, don't. A second voice murmured the woman's name, hers, not the bar's name for her, and the edges of her went soft for a moment, like she wanted to turn into the call. They learn what works, he said to both of us. They get your cadence. The step creaked again. The flashlight juddered. The full glass on the table fogged heavier, as if someone leaned over it. A print appeared in the dust on the table's edge. Not a handprint, inverted, the shape of a ring with a small notch where it had been dented long ago. The woman reached into her bag and took out, not a talisman, not a weapon, but a book of paper tabs from the register upstairs, the kind the staff tore to carry orders. Each little ticket printed with O'Malley S in green ink. She tore one off, wrote something, and tucked it under the full glass. The fog on the glass quivered. What did you write? I asked. A name, she said. Not hers. I squinted at the slip. The ink blurred from here. Could have said anything. Could have said everyone. The weight on the stairs shifted upward, a careful retracing. The air warmed by 1 degree. The darts upstairs thunked in their board in a rhythm that didn't match anyone's throw. The man eased his shoulders. You can't take anything up, he told me, probably because he saw my eyes flick to the triangular piece. You can carry what you brought. You can carry the names you came with. That's it. Then why come down? I asked. Why bring anything down at all? Because this is where the checks get run, the woman said. Bars aren't about pouring drinks. They're about settling up. She picked up the triangle again. This time, when she raised it to the plate, the angle was different by a hair, and the edge met its negative space with a tiny click, as casual as a fingernail on glass. The Halon box hummed once, an appliance remembering it was alive. The condensation on the full glass thinned, a light distillation in reverse. Somewhere behind us, the stairs decided there was no one on them, and the cracked step unbent itself. The man let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, and then every light in the basement went out. The dark was immediate and whole. I had the useless, childish urge to put my hands over my face. The man's flashlight stuttered and then snapped back on. We were alone as people get. The full glass was now 2/3 empty. The slip of paper was damp. My name sounded again from very far away, from the curve of a payphone receiver, from the hollow in the wall where a phone used to be. The woman squeezed my hand once more and let go. "Upstairs," she said. "Slow." We climbed. The rails glistened with moisture they hadn't earned. A strand of someone's hair was caught on a low nail, as fine and bright as fishing line. We came out into the hallway, and the exit sign had been plugged back in. The bar was louder, not with sound but with attention, all eyes doing their best to be looking somewhere else. Vince was pretending to count the register. He tapped the stack of ones, hummed a tuneless hum, glanced up, down, up, as if he could catch the air in a lie. "Last call," he said to no one and everyone. That was last call. The clock said 11:17. The TV looped the same pitch, the same swing, the same foul tip nicking the catcher's mask. "Well?" Ryan called from the darts, braver at distance. "You bring back any ghosts?" "They don't come when you ask," the woman said. "Like cabs." She set the triangle on the bar. It sat without hissing, no longer hot, and the quarter in my pocket went cold, like it had been left on a windowsill in January. The couple in the booth had their hands clasped under the table like children at a long grace. The man in the pea coat took the damp paper slip and slid it into his wallet without reading it. "You keep that?" I asked. "For who?" "For the right night," he said. "For the person who comes in and orders a drink they've never had." He nodded at my glass. I finished it, feeling dutiful and superstitious at the same time. "Now tell it," the woman said, and this time the man didn't argue. He looked down the bar, past me, past the people trying not to hear. "Hector," he said, pointing lightly with his chin at the man with the coach cap. First time he told it, he did it too loud and the beer glass cracked in his hand. "Remember?" Vince let out a short laugh that tasted like a bruise. "He came in on a Tuesday," the man went on, "in a suit that didn't fit yet, like a promotion he'd been walking around in for a week. He was happy in that way men are happy when they've just been told they're real. He ordered a shot of tequila and a beer back, and he told me his father used to do it like that, so it felt like a toast. He started talking to the guy next to him like they'd known each other forever, because that's what bars do. Arrange strangers so their lives overlap on purpose. And then he said the thing. Hector's face rearranged itself into a smile he didn't want. "I said," he murmured to the beer, "that I would give anything to keep this feeling, just like this, to hold the night right where it was. And," the man said, "the night said okay." The bar laughed the way crowds laugh when they want a story to end in a punchline. But nothing in the room took a breath ahead of the laugh, so the sound fell flat. "He got up to piss," the man continued. "And when he came back, the stool was the same shape it had been, and the sweat on the glass hadn't moved. The game was in the same inning, but the person beside him wasn't the same. It was someone new who knew everything the other guy had said, but didn't sound like him. Then the jukebox changed songs to a song that hadn't been chosen. And when Hector looked up at the clock, it was 11:17. "I get it," I said. "Time loop, Twilight Zone, very clever." "No," Hector said. "It's worse because it isn't a loop. It's a choice that keeps being made for you in smaller and smaller ways. You don't feel the loop. You feel the edits. And every time you try to do one thing different, the bar gives you back something almost the same. And you can stay. God, you can always stay." The woman reached behind the bar like she'd done it 1,000 times and pulled out a small, battered notebook with a cracked elastic band. She opened to a middle page that had been turned to too many times and set it on the counter so the spine sighed. The page was a list of names, not in order, with dates and, beside some, a single word: home, paid, owed, gone. Beside a handful, written in red with a thin line like a paper cut, was keep. "We don't like that word here," Vince said, jerking his chin at keep. "But some folks insist. They don't all die," the woman said to me, catching the shape my thoughts were making. "Some of them just don't leave. Because it feels good? Because it feels half-finished. the man said. That's a powerful drug. He tapped the book once with a finger. We do our best to settle what we can. Sometimes the basement helps. Sometimes it takes a piece as a deposit, and that's enough for the upstairs to let go. He glanced at the triangle. Sometimes it asks for something you can't give. And the stories? I said. They come when you tell them? They come when you mean them, the woman said. When there's a price in the telling. She looked at me and really saw me for the first time. You didn't wander in out of the rain, she said. You got pulled. I opened my mouth to argue and found that I didn't know where that argument started. There was a shape inside me that had been the outline of a person for months. It had the size and weight of the phone calls I let go to voicemail, of the boxes I didn't open when I moved the last time. It had the same taste as the drink I always ordered even when I said I wanted something better. Ask him what he lost, Vince said softly into the middle distance. Ask him if he wants it back. The bar kept pretending to do ordinary things. Wiping tables, clinking ice, pressing limes, but each sound was spaced exactly the same distance from the next. I could feel the night beginning to decide what version of itself I would get. The woman put the cracked elastic back around the notebook. We can help you put something down, she said, or we can help you carry it. We're not a church. We're a bar. What do I owe? I asked like a reflex. Depends what you think you deserve, the man said. It's usually too much. The couple in the booth finally exhaled. Their hands untwined. Ryan hit a bullseye no one saw. The TV found the next pitch and let it go. The bar clock, stubborn creature, flicked forward to 11:18 and held. I didn't realize I'd been bracing until the small relief made my knees soft. The woman lifted the triangle and dropped it into her bag. It made a sound like a dull bell, and I felt every name in the notebook sit up a little, listening for their own. We're not done, she told the man in the pea coat. But maybe that's enough for tonight. He angled his head, agreeing. Tabs get settled in pieces, he said. He looked at my glass, empty now, and smiled without warmth. You did good, he said to me. You didn't look when it called you. What happens if you do? I asked. He started to answer and stopped, because the door at the front opened, not with a creak this time, but with the relief of a lock finding its matching key. The rain had thinned to needles. A boy walked in, barely 21, hair wet, coat too big. He looked around the bar like you do when you're trying to find a version of yourself that will fit into a room. He came to the counter and said, with the careful bravado of first nights, shot of tequila and a beer back. The man in the peacoat sighed, not unhappy, not happy. The woman reached for the notebook. What's your name? She asked the boy. He told her. It wasn't a name I recognized, which didn't matter. The bar recognized it. The lights agreed that he belonged. The jukebox found a song he'd never heard that would be his favorite for exactly 3 months. The clock hesitated, admired itself, and become 11:19. I felt the knot inside me loosen half a turn. Half was something. The woman tore off a tab from the book and wrote the boy's name and a number beneath it that wasn't a price. She slid it under his glass. The condensation caught the ink and made a small black river. The man in the peacoat looked at me and finally answered my question. If you turn around when it calls, he said, you get exactly what you asked for and never the part you need. He lifted his glass. We drank to that, all of us, even Vince, who hated to be seen believing in anything at all. And in the quiet that followed, I realized that the stories in a bar don't have to be ghosts to be true. They just have to keep happening, the way rain keeps finding a window, the way time keeps trying to move even when a room won't let it. I put another 20 on the bar. It looked wrong there. It looked like the wrong currency for this place. The woman tapped it like a card to an old machine. We'll go back down, she said, not tonight, but soon. You'll come if you want to. The door breathed. The neon sign sputtered and held. The boy toasted his first night. The couple negotiated their second chance in whispers. The darts came home. The tab notebook lay between us like a sleeping thing. And somewhere under our feet, in the low room that borrowed air from upstairs, a glass finished emptying itself very, very slowly, as if careful not to wake anyone. The boy at the bar drank his tequila with the sharp inhale of someone still learning to hide the wince. His eyes watered just enough to betray him, and he chased it with a gulp of beer like he was erasing a sentence from a chalkboard. The man in the peacoat watched him without watching, the way you track a conversation you're not part of but might need to join if it goes the wrong direction. The woman set her bag on the bar, resting one hand on it like she was holding down a restless animal. Rain whispered against the window in a new pattern, thinner but faster, like fingertips drumming on glass. Outside, the street lamps burned inside small halos of mist. The door had stopped breathing, but the air still carried that sense of a draft coming from somewhere it shouldn't. I kept thinking about the basement, the condensation on the untouched glass, the way my name had sounded when it called to me. It hadn't been a whisper in the horror movie sense. It had been casual, familiar, like I'd left a conversation mid-sentence and someone wanted to pull me back in. The boy ordered a second round. That was when the couple in the booth decided to leave. They stood together, holding hands in that tentative way people do after they've decided to give each other another try. They nodded at Vince as they passed, and he gave them a half-smile that seemed more like a warning than a goodbye. The woman glanced after them. "They won't make it to the end of the block," she said quietly, not to anyone in particular. I felt a cold curl in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," she said, which was worse than an answer. The man in the peacoat finally slid his glass away, the empty clink loud in the low hum of the bar. "We've got time before it changes again," he said to the woman. She tilted her head slightly. "You sure? Enough time for a look." I knew instantly they weren't talking about me this time, but about the boy. "No," I said, maybe too quickly. "Not him." The man didn't smile. "That's how it works. First night is when the bar decides if it likes you." "What happens if it does?" I asked. He didn't answer, just turned to the boy. "You want to see the cellar?" The boy looked at him like he'd been offered a free round. "What for?" "Every bar has its secrets," the man said. "This one's polite enough to show you." The boy hesitated. He looked around the room, maybe expecting someone to tell him it was a joke, but no one did. Vince kept his head down. Ryan at the dartboard lined up a throw that didn't matter. The bar gave him no reason to say no. "Sure," the boy said. The woman's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She picked up her bag, and the three of them headed toward the hallway with the dead white door. I stayed where I was for all of 5 seconds before I followed. The cellar door seemed more visible now, like it had been brushed clean of whatever made it blend in. The paint looked fresh, though I knew it wasn't, and the keyhole seemed deeper. The woman unlocked it and gestured for the boy to go first. "You'll want to hold the rail," he said, reaching for it automatically. "Don't," she said sharply. "Touch the wall if you need to, not the rail." He laughed like he thought she was joking, but when she didn't laugh back, he kept his hands tucked into his coat pockets. The steps counted themselves again, 7, 8, 9, 12, and then the room opened up. The flashlight beam swam over the kegs, the walls, the halon plate with its reattached corner. I swear the air changed the moment the boy stepped off the last stair, like the basement was exhaling in approval. "Why's it so cold?" he asked. "Preserves the stock," the man in the peacoat said. "Preserves other things too," the woman added under her breath. The boy wandered toward the far wall, running his fingers close to but not quite touching the keg lines. "You could totally live down here," he said, and then laughed at himself. "No," the man said quietly. "That's when the glass appeared. It wasn't there when we came down. I'm sure of it. But now it sat in the center of the low table, half full, pale amber under the flashlight. The rim gleamed wet. The boy frowned. "Is this for me?" "No," the woman said, too quickly. He reached for it anyway. I moved before I could think about it, catching his wrist just shy of the glass. "Don't touch that." "Why not?" he demanded. It's just a drink. It's not yours, the man said. The boy looked between us like we were crazy. You guys are making this weird. The woman took something from her bag. A coaster, plain cardboard with O'Malley's in faded green ink, and slid it under the glass without moving it. She wrote something on it with a pen that looked older than the bar itself. Then she stepped back. The condensation began to gather faster, like the glass had been pulled from an ice bath. A thin curl of steam rose from the liquid. The boy stared. What the hell is that? Someone else's, the man said. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I heard the stairs creak, the same step as before, and the voice came again. My name. This time it wasn't from behind me. Came from the glass. The boy heard it too. His eyes widened and he took a half step back. The woman looked at me. You hear it again? Yes. My voice didn't sound like mine. The man in the peacoat moved to the halon plate and pressed his hand to it. The metal seemed to drink in the warmth. The hum started again, low and steady. The voice from the glass faded, but the condensation had formed into the faint outline of lips pressed to the rim. The boy swallowed. I'm going back upstairs. The woman nodded. That's the smart choice. We climbed the stairs in silence. This time, I stayed close enough to the woman to see the subtle shift of her shoulders, like she was listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear. Back in the main room, the boy made straight for the door. The rain had stopped, but the street looked slick and strange under the streetlights. He glanced back once before stepping outside. The woman let out a breath. If he's lucky, he won't come back. The man shook his head. He'll be back. I didn't ask why. I already knew the answer. The rest of the night felt stretched thin, like the bar was holding itself in place just long enough for something to decide whether it wanted to stay. The jukebox played songs no one had picked. Vince didn't announce last call again, but people left in ones and twos until it was just the four of us and Ryan at the dartboard, missing more than he hit. The clock above the bar finally moved to 11:20. Felt like a warning. The clock's shift to 11:20 shouldn't have mattered. It was just a number, just the smallest motion of one brass hand. But in O'Malley's, it felt like someone upstairs had moved a pawn forward, and now we were waiting to see if the board noticed. Ryan threw another dart and missed by enough that it buried itself in the cork seam between targets. He muttered something and went to pull it out, but when he got there, he just stood, looking at the board like it had whispered to him. The man in the peacoat leaned on the bar, arms folded. You're thinking too loud, he said to me without looking. I'm thinking about leaving, I said. No, he replied. You're thinking about coming back. The woman smirked faintly. He's right. Nobody leaves here without thinking about how soon they'll return. That's the hook. You don't even know you've bitten it yet. Vince poured something from a dusty bottle I hadn't seen before and slid it toward her. She didn't drink it. She just left it there, the liquid catching the light in a way that made it look thicker than it should have been. What happens if you don't come back? I asked. The man shrugged. The bar waits. Sometimes it waits years. But the tab doesn't go away. It just sits there. Running interest you don't see until you walk through that door again. That's not how tabs work, I said. He finally turned to look at me. It's exactly how tabs work. You think you've left them behind, but the debt remembers. The jukebox chose a new song. It was an old ballad, something mournful, the kind of thing people dance to at the very end of a wedding when only the stubborn remain. Nobody in the bar moved, but I felt a shift, a slow leaning of the room toward the back hallway. The woman picked up her glass and took a long drink. It's restless tonight, she said. That's because you brought something back up, Vince muttered. She gave him a sharp look. We put it back. Not quick enough, he said. Ryan returned from the dartboard, a little too pale, his darts still in his hand. You ever get the feeling someone's trying to line you up? He asked no one in particular. Not someone, the man said. Something. Ryan blinked. Yeah, that's what I meant. The air shifted again. It was subtle but real, like the difference between being watched and being weighed. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the same unknown number from before. This time, when I pulled it out, the screen didn't show digits. Just a single word. Settle. I set the phone face down on the bar. The woman saw my expression. "It's already got your name," she said. "How?" "You came downstairs," she said simply. "That's all it takes." The man straightened. "We need to take him down again." "No," she said instantly. "Yes," he countered. "Better now than when it comes for him on its own. At least we can walk him in." I didn't like the way they talked about me like I wasn't in the room. "I'm not going back down there." They didn't answer. The jukebox stuttered and looped the first chord of the song. The lights over the bar flickered. Vince muttered a curse under his breath. "Fine," he said, reaching under the counter. He came up with the keys again and set them down between us. "But if you go down, you listen. You follow. You don't touch anything unless she tells you to." The woman was already on her feet. She nodded at me. "Let's go." I glanced toward the door. Outside, the street looked warped, as if the rain had left behind not puddles but lenses, bending the light into unfamiliar shapes. Inside, the hallway waited. The stairs felt different this time. Colder but also steeper, like each step wanted more from me. The smell was sharper, too. Not just beer and bleach, but something faintly metallic, like coins left in a damp pocket. At the bottom, the flashlight beam swept the room. The halon plate was still whole. The table was still there. But this time there were two glasses. One empty, one half full. "Who's the empty one for?" I asked. "Not for," the man said. "From." The woman stepped toward the table. She set her bag down, reached in, and pulled out the triangular piece again. "This is where it started," she said, more to herself than to me. She fitted it into the halon plate. The hum began immediately, louder than before. The keg lines vibrated softly, the liquid inside moving without being touched. The man looked at me. "Pick up the empty glass." "Why?" "Because it's yours," he said. The glass was cold enough to sting. I held it, and for a second I thought I saw my own reflection in the surface, but it wasn't quite my face. The eyes were wrong. The mouth was moving. "What do I do with it?" I asked. The woman's voice was flat. "Decide." The hum deepened. The condensation on the other glass swirled, as if stirred by an invisible hand. I wanted to set mine back down, but my grip wouldn't loosen. I realized I was waiting for something. A signal, a word, a permission I didn't remember asking for. Then I heard it again. My name. This time not from behind me or from the glass. From everywhere. The man's voice cut through it. "If you answer, you're done." I clenched my jaw and said nothing. The hum slowed. The glass in my hand warmed. The condensation on the other glass faded until it was gone. The woman took the triangular piece out of the plate and dropped it back into her bag. The air eased, like a room after an argument no one will admit happened. "Upstairs," she said. We climbed in silence. The hallway light flickered once and then held steady. Back at the bar, Vince didn't ask. Ryan didn't look up from his darts. The clock above the liquor shelves read 11:20. Same as before. The woman sat, her coat dripping on the floor. "Now you've got a tab," she said. I swallowed. "How do I pay it?" The man smiled faintly. "That's the part you don't get to choose." The man's words sat between us like another glass on the bar. Something no one was going to touch until they had to. The jukebox had gone quiet, which should have felt like a relief. But instead it was as if the silence had a pulse of its own, faint but steady. Vince busied himself with stacking clean pint glasses under the counter, though I could see they were already stacked and polished. His hands moved anyway, just to keep from being still. I didn't like the way the woman was watching me. Not predatory, not even judgmental, but assessing, as if she was watching an hourglass she couldn't flip over. "You've got time," she said finally. "Until what?" "Until collection night." The man in the peacoat glanced toward her. Don't start that now. Better now than when he finds out the wrong way, she said. I leaned forward. What's collection night? The man didn't answer. Vince did. It's when the bar closes early, he said, and his voice was flat enough that it wasn't really an answer at all. How early? Depends on the tab, the woman said. I felt a knot form in my stomach. You make it sound like there's more than one way to pay. There is, she said. You either settle with something you can afford to lose, or you wait until the bar decides what to take instead. And how does it decide? The man lifted his empty glass, stared into it for a moment, then set it down again. It listens. The clock above the liquor shelves ticked to 11:21. It shouldn't have felt significant, but the air shifted. Not colder this time, not heavier, just different, as if the night had subtly changed its mind about something. A man I hadn't seen before stepped through the door. He was older, his face deeply lined, wearing a leather jacket that looked broken and long before he owned it. He walked with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged here but hadn't been back in a while. Vince stiffened behind the bar, and the woman's hand dropped unconsciously to her bag. Evening, the man said, his voice low and warm. Place hasn't changed much. Some things don't, Vince said, but his eyes didn't leave the man's hands. The newcomer took a seat 2 stools down from me. He didn't order. He just set a small, battered wooden box on the bar and slid it toward Vince. The movement made no sound, like the box had been taught to keep quiet. Vince didn't open it. Thought you weren't coming back, he said. I thought so too, the man said. But I heard the bar was calling in tabs. The woman's gaze sharpened. Whose? The man smiled faintly. Mine. The box sat there, small and unremarkable, but the air around it felt thick, like it was soaking up light. I didn't realize I was leaning away from it until my shoulder brushed the man in the peacoat. He didn't move. Vince finally lifted the lid. Inside was a single coin, larger than a quarter, stamped with an unfamiliar symbol that made my eyes want to slide off it. The metal had a faintly green patina, like it had been buried for years. Vince closed the lid immediately. That's enough, he said. Not quite, the man replied. That just opens the door. The rest, that's between me and downstairs. The woman's jaw tightened. Don't go alone. I've done it before. Things change. The man looked at her for a long moment, then at me. You're new, he said. Ever see what happens on collection night? I shook my head. Then come along. Might be educational. The man in the peacoat muttered something I didn't catch. The woman just said, Don't touch anything. I followed the older man toward the back hallway before I could talk myself out of it. The cellar door seemed to know what was happening. The key slid in without hesitation, the lock clicking open with a quiet satisfaction. The descent was slower this time. The older man carried no flashlight, but the dim light from above stretched farther than it should have, painting the steps in a dull, steady glow. At the bottom, the air was sharper, the hum of the keg lines lower, almost like a growl. The table was waiting. On it sat 2 glasses, one full, one empty, and between them, a folded slip of paper. The man set the wooden box beside the paper and opened it. The coin inside caught the faint light, gleaming in a way that felt alive. He picked up the full glass, held it in one hand, and with the other, placed the coin in the empty glass. It landed with a sound that was too loud for such a small object, a ringing note that seemed to echo not in the air, but in my chest. The hum deepened. The halon plate rattled against the wall. The man drank the full glass in 3 long swallows. When he set it down, the empty glass was no longer empty. The coin was gone. I stared. Where did it go? The man smiled faintly. Paid. The condensation on the glass thickened until I couldn't see inside. Pulsed once, like a heartbeat, then stilled. The hum eased. The air lightened. The man picked up the folded paper and slipped it into his jacket without opening it. That's that, he said. That's it. I asked, For me. He looked at me in a way that made it clear it wouldn't be that simple for me. Your night'll come. We climbed back upstairs, and when we stepped into the bar, I could feel eyes on us. Not from the people, but from the place itself. The clock read 11:21. The jukebox began playing again. Something low and slow, the kind of song that fills the gaps between heartbeats. The man in the peacoat raised an eyebrow at the older man. All settled. For now, the man said. The woman didn't look convinced. Tabs have a way of finding their way back. The older man smiled. Then I'll see you again. He left without another word. The door closed softly behind him, and for the first time all night, the neon sign in the window flickered. The woman turned to me. Now you've seen it. I nodded slowly. I still don't understand it. You're not supposed to. Not yet. She reached into her bag and touched the triangular piece without taking it out. You'll understand when it's your turn. The man in the peacoat lifted his glass. And when it is, I hope you've got something worth offering. The older man's absence left a dent in the room, like he'd taken some of the air with him. Conversations didn't quite resume. Ryan fidgeted with his darts but didn't throw. Vince poured drinks without looking at who ordered them. The jukebox cycled through songs too smoothly, like it already knew the cue. I stayed at the bar, my fingers tapping the rim of my empty glass. The woman watched me in a way that made me feel like I was already on some list in her head. The man in the peacoat sat very still, eyes on the door, as if waiting for the next arrival. What exactly happens on collection night? I asked finally. The woman didn't answer right away. She seemed to be choosing her words, or maybe deciding whether I deserved them. It's the night the bar decides the tab's due, she said. Not when you think it's due, when it thinks it is. And if you can't pay, you will, she said. One way or another. The man in the peacoat added. The trick is to give it something you choose, before it takes something you need. I wanted to ask what counted as something you need, but I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. The door opened again, and for a moment I thought the older man had returned. But it wasn't him. This was a woman in her 30s, hair tied back, carrying a plastic grocery bag. She came straight to the bar, dropped the bag onto it, and slid it toward Vince. Inside was a single loaf of bread, still in its plastic, and a bottle of gin. Vince opened the bottle, poured a small amount into a glass, and set it on the counter without a word. The woman didn't drink. She just pushed the glass toward the center of the bar and left. The man in the peacoat leaned toward me. That's how some people pay. Little pieces, small offerings, enough to keep the tab quiet for another week or two. What happens if you stop paying? He looked at me like I'd asked what happens if you stop breathing. The clock above the bar ticked to 11:22. Something in the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. The woman in the coat stiffened. Vince set the gin bottle down too hard. It's starting, the man in the peacoat said. The door swung open again, but no one came in. The rain smell rolled through, even though the street outside had dried hours ago. The jukebox cut off mid-song. Vince reached under the bar and took out the keyring. It's you tonight, he said to me. What? You've been downstairs twice already. It knows your name. Better to walk in on your own than get dragged. The woman stood. I'll take him. The man in the peacoat rose too. I'll watch the stairs. I didn't argue. Maybe I should have, but some part of me knew there wasn't a real choice. The hallway felt longer this time. The cellar door seemed to swell in the frame, like it had been waiting for me. The woman unlocked it, pushed it open, and gestured for me to go first. The steps were colder, the air heavier. At the bottom, the flashlight swept over the kegs and the halon plate, and then landed on the table. There were 3 glasses this time. One full, one empty, one turned upside down. The woman frowned. That's new. What does it mean? It means you don't have much choice. She picked up the upside-down glass and set it upright in front of me. The empty one she moved to the far side of the table. The full one stayed where it was. "This is your tab," she said, pointing to the empty glass. "That one," she gestured at the full glass, "is the bars. This one," she touched the upright glass, "is what you get if you pay right. And if I don't?" She didn't answer. I stared at the empty glass. My reflection in it wavered, almost like it was breathing. "What do I put in it?" I asked. "Something that's yours. Something it can keep." "I don't have anything." The woman gave me a look that said I was lying, even if I didn't know it. "Everyone has something." I thought about my wallet, my phone, the cheap watch on my wrist. None of it felt right. "It won't take junk," she said. "It wants weight. Not the kind you can hold, the kind you carry." I thought of the voicemail on my phone, the one I hadn't deleted in over a year. I thought of the unopened box in my closet from my last apartment. My hand went to my pocket before I even realized it. The woman's eyes flicked to the motion. "If it's in your head, it's good enough." I closed my eyes, pictured the voicemail, the sound of that voice I hadn't heard in so long, the ache of it, the weight. When I opened my eyes, the empty glass was half full. The woman nodded. "Finish it." I thought of the last time I'd listened to it, the way it had made my throat close. The glass filled to the brim. The hum from the halon plate grew louder, resonating in my bones. "Now drink from the upright glass," she said. I did. It tasted like nothing I'd ever had before. Not sweet, not bitter, but final. The kind of taste you only know once. When I set it down, the full glass was gone. The empty glass was gone. Only mine remained, bone dry. The hum faded. "Tab settled," the woman said quietly. I felt lighter and emptier all at once. We went back upstairs. The clock read 11:22. The man in the peacoat gave me a long, searching look, then nodded once. Vince slid a fresh drink toward me without asking. "You're good for now," he said. "For now." The woman's voice was almost gentle. "Tabs always come back." The drink Vince slid toward me sat untouched for a while. I stared at it, feeling the strange absence inside me where something had been taken. It wasn't like forgetting. It was like remembering something perfectly and realizing it no longer had an ending. The weight was gone, but so was the shape it had left. The woman didn't push me to drink. The man in the peacoat had gone back to staring at the door, his posture loose but deliberate, like a watchman who knew the thing he was guarding against wouldn't come through the front. The jukebox started up again, soft at first, an old piano ballad that sounded like it was being played in the next room. Ryan threw a dart that hit dead center, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. He left it in the board and walked out without a word. The door shut and the sound of the street didn't follow him in or out, just that same faint rain smell. I finished the drink without tasting it. That was when I noticed my phone was gone. I checked my pockets twice, then a third time. Nothing. Vince didn't look up from the glass he was polishing. "You didn't lose it," he said. "Then where is it?" "Probably where it belongs now." The woman leaned her elbow on the bar. "Things have a way of going where the bar can still reach them. You don't really get to carry them out." "I've left this place with my stuff before," I said. "Sure," she replied. "The things you think matter. The rest, it knows what's worth keeping." I wanted to argue, but the thought of that voicemail, gone now, truly gone, stopped me cold. The man in the peacoat finally spoke. "You should go home." "Why?" "Because you've settled for now, and you don't want to be here when the bar decides it didn't get enough." Something in his tone made me stand without thinking. I didn't say goodbye. I just stepped out into the street. It was dry, but the air was damp enough to stick in my lungs. The street lamps looked brighter than usual, haloed in a faint, oily shimmer. My apartment was 4 blocks away. I walked quickly, hands deep in my coat pockets, and tried not to think about the taste of that upright glass. Halfway home, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, even not matching my pace. I glanced over my shoulder. The street was empty. I sped up, The steps matched me again, still slow, still deliberate. Not closer. Not farther. Just there. I cut down a side street. The sound came too, even though the only surface back here was slick brick and wet pavement. By the time I reached my building, my chest felt tight. I unlocked the front door, slipped inside, and bolted it behind me. The hallway was dim, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly overhead. I rode the elevator to the 5th floor. The mirrored wall inside showed only me. No one else. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, double-bolted it, and set the chain. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, trying to shake the feeling. When I opened the cupboard, my phone was sitting inside, screen up. It lit as I touched it. No notifications. No missed calls. Just one new voicemail. No number listed. I pressed play. It was my voice, but not from tonight. From downstairs. The moment I'd said, "What do I put in it?" And then, faintly, in the background, the woman's voice answering, "Something it can keep." The recording ended there. I deleted it. Or tried to. The icon spun but didn't disappear. The next morning, it was still there. Over the next week, little things began to shift. At the grocery store, I thought I saw the man in the pea coat by the frozen foods. But when I blinked, it was a stranger in a windbreaker. In my apartment, the sound of the bar's jukebox would thread faintly through the hum of my refrigerator. At night, I'd sometimes wake to the smell of bleach and beer, sharp and clean and wrong in the dark. I stayed away from O'Malley's. At least I tried. It was a Thursday when I walked home from work and found myself on its block without realizing it. The neon sign glowed in the window, pale and steady. The door was propped open, though the air outside was cool enough to make that uncomfortable. From the sidewalk I could hear the hum. Not the jukebox, not conversation, the Halon hum from downstairs. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stepped inside. The bar was nearly empty. Vince was behind the counter, and the woman sat at the far end, her bag on the stool beside her. The man in the pea coat was nowhere to be seen. "You're back," Vince said, not surprised. "I didn't mean to be," I said. "That's how it works." The woman gestured me over. "Sit." I did. "You feel it yet?" she asked. "What?" "That it's not done with you." I swallowed. "What does it want now?" She tilted her head. "Depends. Sometimes it just wants to remind you it can call. Sometimes it's making sure you're still available." "For what?" Vince set a glass in front of me. It was empty. "You'll find out," she said. The clock above the bar read 11:22. The second hand wasn't moving. The empty glass in front of me caught the dim light and held it in a way that made the rim gleam too bright for such a dull room. I didn't touch it. The woman didn't either. Vince moved down the bar to refill a regular's beer, but I could feel him watching from the corner of his eye. The jukebox started playing something low and slow, a bass line that sounded like a heartbeat muffled through walls. The song wasn't familiar, but I knew the way it was played, the uneven drag in the tempo, the pause just before the downbeat. It was the same rhythm the basement had. The woman folded her hands on the bar. "Do you know why it keeps you close?" she asked. "Because I went downstairs?" "Because you brought something up," she said. "The first time it was small enough it didn't mind. The second time it let you think you'd paid. But you didn't." "I gave it what it wanted," I said. "You gave it what it would take in that moment," she corrected. "That's not the same as being square." I stared at the glass. "So what now?" Her gaze flicked to the clock. Still 11:22. The second hand frozen. "Now it decides whether to ask or take." The air in the bar shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just tighter, like the space between walls had narrowed without moving. My phone vibrated in my pocket. When I pulled it out, the screen showed nothing but the bar's address. No caller ID, no text, just the address, pulsing faintly as though it were alive. I set it face down on the bar. The hum from below rose just enough to be heard over the jukebox. The woman looked toward the back hallway. It's coming up. Vince muttered a curse under his breath and began locking the till. The few other patrons, a man in a faded hoodie, a woman nursing a glass of red wine, seemed to sense the shift. They left without paying, without speaking. The hallway darkened in a way that didn't match the rest of the room. The light from the main bar just stopped at the doorway, like there was a pane of smoked glass there. The man in the peacoat emerged from that darkness, moving slowly. He looked at me like he was confirming something he'd already guessed. "It's yours tonight," he said. I felt the back of my neck prickle. "I'm not going down there again." He shook his head. "You don't have to. It's coming to you." The woman's hand went into her bag. I expected her to pull out the triangular piece, but instead she set a small, flat object on the bar in front of me. It was a brass key worn smooth, the teeth filed down to nubs. "Hold this," she said. "What for?" "It's the only thing that makes it wait before it takes." The man in the peacoat stepped aside as if making room for someone, or something, to pass. The shadows in the hallway swelled, stretched, and for a second they seemed to take shape. Not a person. Not quite. The jukebox needle hissed as though a record had ended, though no one had touched it. The hum grew louder. I gripped the key. It felt warmer than it should, like it had been sitting in someone's palm for hours. The empty glass in front of me wasn't empty anymore. It was full, not with beer or whiskey, but with something darker, thicker. The surface didn't ripple, it pulsed. "Don't drink it," the woman said sharply. "I wasn't going to." "Good," the man in the peacoat said. "Because if you do, it keeps more than you offered." The shadows slid closer. They didn't move across the floor so much as arrive, the way a smell arrives in a room before you notice it's been there. I could hear something faint. Not words, but the cadence of speech. My name threaded through it once, then again. I shut my eyes. "Careful," the woman said. "It wants you to listen. That's how it knows what to take." The brass key in my hand throbbed once, like a slow heartbeat. The hum from the floor deepened. Then, as quickly as it had come, the pressure in the room eased. The glass on the bar was empty again. The shadows thinned back into ordinary darkness. The man in the peacoat exhaled. "You bought yourself time." I opened my eyes. "How much?" The woman pulled the key from my hand. "A night. Maybe 2. Then it'll try again." I swallowed. "And after that?" "After that," she said, "you either give it what it wants, or it chooses for you." Vince came back down the bar, setting the key in a small drawer under the register. "Drink," he said. "You're going to need it." The clock on the wall ticked forward to 11:23. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left O'Malley's, I could still feel the warm shape of the brass key in my palm, though I'd given it back. The sound of the hum from the halon plate seemed to linger in my ears, faint and constant, like tinnitus. I kept checking my phone, and every time I did, the battery percentage was the same, 77%, no matter how long I used it. By dawn, I was sitting at my kitchen table with cold coffee, staring at the wall like it might move. The voicemail was still there. I stopped trying to delete it. Work was impossible. My mind kept circling back to the empty glass, the shadows swelling in the hallway, the sensation of something making room for itself in the space around me. By 3 o'clock, I gave up and left. I told myself I wasn't going to O'Malley's, but I took the long way home, the way that passed its block. The neon sign wasn't on. That was wrong. It was always on, even in daylight, even when the bar was closed. The door was shut but not locked. Inside, it was dimmer than usual, the air warmer. Vince wasn't behind the bar. The woman wasn't at her stool. The man in the peacoat was nowhere in sight. But there was a glass on the bar. It was mine. I knew it the way you know your own handwriting. A faint scratch in the rim from when I'd knocked it against a table months ago. It was full, the liquid dark and unmoving. No condensation. I took a step toward it. The door closed behind me without a sound. From somewhere deep in the building, the hum began. Louder this time, no longer pretending to be background noise. The light in the room seemed to bend toward the glass, as if it were the center of gravity. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I didn't take it out. I already knew what it would say. My name. The voice wasn't in my head. It was in the room, low and patient. I backed toward the door, but the floor felt longer than it should have. The bar stretched in both directions, the bottles behind it tilting just enough to catch the light in my peripheral vision. Another vibration from my pocket. This one harder, insistent. The glass on the bar was closer now. I hadn't moved, but it was. The liquid inside shifted slightly, as though something had brushed against it from below. My name again. Louder. I forced myself to speak. What do you want? The hum faltered for a fraction of a second, then resumed. The liquid in the glass rippled once. The door to the hallway creaked open on its own. No light spilled out, only a slow, cool draft that smelled like damp concrete. I didn't want to go. I went anyway. The hallway was longer than it had ever been, the white paint on the walls grayer, older. I kept waiting for the cellar door to appear, but it didn't. The floor sloped downward. The hum grew louder. When the door finally appeared, it was already open. No key, no lock, just an invitation. The stairs were different, wider, the concrete darker, the steps deeper. I counted them automatically. 7, 8, 9, 12, 15. At the bottom, the room wasn't the same one I'd been in before. The kegs were gone. The halon plate was gone. The walls were damp stone, uneven and breathing cool air into the space. And in the center, a single table. On it sat 2 glasses. One was mine. One was not. The other glass was larger, the liquid inside colorless but heavier than water. When I looked too long, the surface blurred, and I saw shapes there, outlines of people, moments, things I didn't want to recognize. My name again, but this time it came from the larger glass. The hum slowed. A figure stepped out of the dark corner. It was the man in the pea coat. Or maybe it wasn't. His coat was the same, but his face wasn't fixed. It shifted slightly, like looking at a reflection in moving water. "You're late," he said. "For what?" "Settling." I swallowed. "I already did." "Not enough," he said, and the glass on the table pulsed once. I looked around for the woman, for Vince, for anyone else. There was no one. Just the man, the glasses, the hum. "What happens if I don't?" He tilted his head. "You already know." I stared at my glass. It was empty. The larger glass rippled again, and I saw my own apartment in it, dimly lit. The front door was ajar. Something moved in the kitchen just out of sight. The hum deepened until it felt like it was inside my bones. "Choose," the man said. I didn't know what I was choosing, only that standing there was already making the choice for me. I reached for my glass. It was cold, so cold it burned. The moment my fingers closed around it, the hum stopped. The larger glass went still. The image of my apartment vanished. When I set the glass back down, it was full. The man in the pea coat smiled, or maybe the coat smiled and the face followed. "Better," he said. And then I was standing in the main bar again. The neon sign was on. Vince was behind the counter. The woman was at her stool. The clock read 11:24. No one said anything. I left without looking back. I didn't go back to O'Malley's for 3 nights. Or maybe I did. I woke each morning not entirely sure where I'd been the night before. My shoes were damp. My jacket smelled faintly of beer and bleach, and the voicemail on my phone, the one I couldn't delete, had new sounds in the background. First a low hum, then footsteps, then the faint clink of glass against wood. By the 4th night, the address appeared on my phone again, not as a message, just there, replacing the time display. 11:24. I told myself I'd ignore it. At 11:25, the power in my apartment flickered and died. The silence that followed wasn't silent at all. It was full, the kind of full that happens when you're underwater and can hear your own blood moving. The hum began, distant but growing. like it was climbing the stairs to my floor. I grabbed my coat and went outside. The street was deserted, every window dark. Only the bar was lit, its neon sign steady and patient. The door was open. Inside, Vince stood behind the bar, his hands flat on the counter. The woman was at her usual place, but her bag was open wider than I'd ever seen it, the brass triangle and other objects inside catching the dim light. The man in the pea coat stood near the hallway, his posture still but braced, like a sentry who knew the fight wasn't out there. It was in here. "You're early," Vince said. "I'm not sure I had a choice," I said. The woman closed her bag. "Collection night." The man in the pea coat gestured toward the hallway. "It's waiting." I didn't move. "What happens if I don't go?" "You already know," he said. The woman came over and pressed something into my palm. Not the brass key. A folded slip of paper, worn soft from handling. "If it asks for more than you have, give it this," she said. "What is it?" "A name," she said. "Not yours." I wanted to ask whose, but she was already turning away. The hallway was darker than I'd ever seen it. The edges soft, the shadows heavier. The cellar door stood open. No lock, no key. The stairs counted differently this time. Each step felt longer, as if the space between them had stretched. My footfalls were swallowed by the hum, which was louder now, impatient. At the bottom, the basement was empty except for the table. 3 glasses. One empty, one half full, one turned upside down. The man in the pea coat appeared beside me without a sound. "It's giving you a choice," he said. "What kind of choice?" "Partial payment," he said, nodding to the half-full glass. "Or all at once." He indicated the upside-down one. "What happens if I pick the wrong one?" "You don't get another chance." The hum deepened, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. The half-full glass quivered, sending ripples across its surface. The upside-down glass dripped once, though nothing had been in it. I remembered the slip of paper in my hand. The man noticed it too. "She gave you that?" "Yes." He looked almost sad. "Then you've already been chosen." The hum rose higher, sharper, until it was more than sound. It was a pressure in my teeth, my skull. The empty glass slid toward me without being touched. My phone buzzed. I didn't look. I knew what it would say. The man stepped back into the dark, leaving me alone with the table. I unfolded the slip of paper. One name, written in ink so dark it almost seemed to shine. Hector. The hum stopped for a fraction of a second, like the room was inhaling. I set the paper under the empty glass. The other 2 glasses vanished. The hum resumed, softer now, almost satisfied. When I looked down, the empty glass was gone too. The paper remained blank. The man in the pea coat reappeared. "Paid," he said. "For now." The woman's voice came from the stairs. "We don't get to choose how long for now lasts." When we came up, the bar looked the same, but the clock read 11:25. The second hand ticked forward. Vince poured me a drink. "You bought yourself a season," he said. "A season? That's more than most." The woman closed her bag. "Spend it how you want. Just remember the bar keeps its own calendar." I sat, the drink untouched, listening to the jukebox hum without music. For the first time, I wondered if staying away would even matter. Because deep down, I knew the bar didn't live at O'Malley's. It lived wherever it could collect. The season passed the way a slow fever does, quiet, invisible, until you realize it's been shaping you the whole time. I stayed away from O'Malley's, but O'Malley's didn't stay away from me. I saw it in glimpses. A glass sitting at the edge of my kitchen counter when I hadn't taken one out. The hum threading through the sound of traffic outside my window. Once, at the laundromat, the machine I was using stopped mid-cycle and I heard the faint chime of the jukebox, like a song playing underwater. I didn't answer. I didn't go. But seasons end. It was a Tuesday when my phone lit up with the bar's address again. No time, no notification. Just the address, glowing against the black screen. I turned it off. The screen stayed lit. By evening, the lights in my apartment dimmed and didn't come back. In the quiet, I could hear the hum, faint at first, then growing. It wasn't coming from below me. It was everywhere. I grabbed my coat, not because I wanted to go, but because I already knew I was going. The street was empty. No cars. No pedestrians. The lamps burned with that oily halo I'd seen before. The bar was the only thing in focus, neon steady, door open. Inside, Vince stood at the bar, the register closed. The woman was at her stool, bag in her lap. The man in the peacoat was already in the hallway, waiting. "No drink tonight," Vince said. "Straight to it." The woman reached into her bag and took out the brass triangle. She looked at me for a long moment before handing it over. "You've got nothing left to give it. This will buy you one choice." One. I didn't ask what the choice was. I followed the man in the peacoat into the hallway. The cellar door was wide open. The air coming up from below was cold enough to make my teeth ache. The steps didn't count themselves this time. They just fell away under my feet until the room opened up, though it wasn't the same room. The kegs were gone again. The halon plate was back, but larger, the triangle missing from its center. The table waited in the middle of the floor. On it, a single glass. Full. The hum was deep and slow, like the breathing of something asleep but dreaming about you. The man in the peacoat stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "This is it," he said. "What happens if I drink? You stay. And if I don't? You leave," he said. "But not all of you." I stepped to the table and set the triangle into the halon plate. Clicked into place perfectly, like it had never been removed. The hum rose, sharper now, vibrating through the floor. The glass rippled. My name formed in the condensation on its side, each letter trembling as though written by an unsteady hand. I picked it up. It was warm. The woman's voice came from behind me, though I hadn't seen her come down the stairs. "You can walk away," she said, "if you put it back." I looked at the triangle in the plate. "What happens if I take it out?" Her expression didn't change. "Then it settles the tab in its own way." The man in the peacoat stayed silent. I set the glass back on the table. My fingers went to the triangle. The hum faltered like a held breath. I pulled it free. The air changed instantly. Colder, sharper. The shadows deepening in the corners. The glass emptied in a heartbeat. The liquid gone without spilling. The condensation on the side spread until it covered the whole surface, then faded, leaving the glass dry. The hum stopped. When I looked up, the room was empty. No man in the peacoat. No woman. Just me, the table, and the glass. I climbed the stairs. The hallway above was longer than it should have been, the light dimmer. When I reached the bar, it wasn't O'Malley's anymore. It was a room I didn't recognize. The counter was the same shape, but the bottles behind it were dusty and unlabeled. The jukebox was silent. The neon sign was gone. A single figure stood behind the bar. Not Vince. Not anyone I'd ever seen. Their face was blurred, like looking at a photograph taken with the wrong lens. "You're late," they said, in a voice that wasn't one voice at all. "For what?" "To open," they said, sliding a glass toward me. It was empty. I didn't move. "Tabs don't vanish," they said. "They change hands." When I looked down, my hands were on the bar, palms flat, the way Vince had stood so many nights. The empty glass sat between them. The figure on the other side of the bar turned and walked into the dark, leaving me alone. Outside, the neon flickered to life. Green letters spelling O'Malley's, and the hum began again, steady and low, waiting for the door to open. Somewhere, in some other version of the night, someone was walking toward it. And I knew exactly how their first drink would taste.